My name's Mark. I'm 66 years old, and I've seen my fair share of storms. But nothing prepared me for what happened that afternoon by the lake. My grandson Josh, only 19 and the pride of our family, turned a playful moment into something that cut deeper than I ever imagined. We'd all gathered for what was supposed to be a calm, sunny weekend, a family tradition that dated back to when my wife and I first bought that little cabin in Michigan decades ago. But one shove, one careless laugh, and a line was crossed that couldn't be undone. Before I dive into that day, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories like this. The day started simple enough. I'd woken up before the rest, as I always do. Old habits. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, sat on the porch overlooking the lake, and let the cool morning air fill my lungs. The water was still like glass, and I thought about how many summers we'd spent here. My kids running off the dock, my grandkids learning to fish. It was one of the last places that truly felt like home. By late morning, the house was alive. Laughter, clinking dishes, the shuffle of feet moving from kitchen to deck. My daughter, Claire, had brought sandwiches and chips, and Josh was the center of it all, loud, charming, the kind of kid everyone gravitated toward. He'd always been a good boy, though lately, I'd noticed a bit of cockiness creeping in. College acceptance letters will do that to a kid, I suppose. We planned to have a quiet lunch outside before taking the boats out. Josh was restless, teasing his younger cousins, splashing water with a stick like a kid half his age. I watched from my chair, a smile tugging at me despite myself. There's something about watching your bloodline grow, even when they're a little too sure of themselves. "Hey, Grandpa, you gonna get in or just sit there?" he called out, smirking. I waved him off. "This chair suits me fine. Someone's got to keep an eye on you hooligans." He grinned, that same mischievous spark I'd seen when he was 10. But then something in his tone shifted, still playful, but sharper. "Come on, live a little. Don't tell me the lake scares you now." It didn't. Not in the least. I taught him to swim. But I was wearing jeans, nursing my coffee, and I wasn't interested in a dip. I laughed, shook my head, and turned back toward the water. That's when it happened. One quick movement, a rush of steps, a sudden shove between my shoulders. I didn't even have time to yell. The world tilted, sky replaced by cold, dark blue. My body plunged into the lake, clothes dragging me down like weights. The shock of it stole my breath. For a second, I was a boy again, lungs tight, the sting of icy water hitting me hard. My arms flailed, searching for air, but the water pressed in, heavy and unrelenting. Above me, muffled laughter. Josh's laugh. I kicked upward, coughing when I finally broke the surface. My chest burned. Water poured from my nose, my mouth, my ears. And there he was on the dock, hands on his knees, laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. "Don't be so dramatic, Grandpa. It's just water," he called, voice full of amusement. Something in me twisted at that. I grabbed the dock, still sputtering, dragging myself up, but the weight of my clothes made it clumsy. My daughter rushed over, wide-eyed. "Dad, are you okay?" I managed to nod, but I was angry. Not because of the water, but because of the laugh. The complete disregard. My grandson, the boy I'd bounced on my knee, the boy I'd saved for, taught, loved, mocking me like I was some old fool. The others tried to brush it off. "He's just playing," someone said. "It's no big deal." No big deal. I sat on the edge of the dock, water streaming off me, heart thudding louder than it should have. At 66, you don't take a fall lightly. But it wasn't my body that hurt. It was my pride. Josh didn't notice, or didn't care. He went back to his phone, laughing, sharing something with a cousin. I noticed a girl holding her phone up, recording. My stomach sank. Was this just another joke for his friends? Another laugh at the old man's expense? I wrung out my shirt, said nothing. My wife handed me a towel, concern in her eyes, but I waved her off. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted respect. The rest of lunch was quiet, at least for me. The sandwiches tasted like cardboard. I heard Josh still chuckling about Grandpa's dive. Everyone else seemed unsure how to react. Some smiled politely, some avoided my eyes. It was as though they'd all agreed to pretend nothing had happened. But inside me, something had shifted. I thought about the boy he'd been and the young man he was becoming. Entitled, careless, unaware of the people who had sacrificed for him. I didn't yell. I didn't lecture. But I knew one thing. This wasn't going to slide by. When you're young, you think actions vanish into thin air. But when you're older, you know they leave marks on people, on relationships, on trust. That afternoon, soaked to the bone, I sat there and decided quietly that this was a line I wouldn't let fade. I sat on that weathered dock longer than I should have, my jeans heavy with lake water, the towel my wife handed me draped uselessly across my shoulders. The others drifted inside, one by one, their voices fading into the cabin, leaving only the gentle lap of water against the wood and the occasional cry of a gull overhead. I stayed put, my mind replaying the push, the splash, the sound of Josh's laughter echoing across the water like a bell I couldn't unhear. That laugh stuck with me. It wasn't the playful giggle of a child. It was sharper, edged with something I couldn't quite name. Mockery, maybe, or the careless joy of someone too young to understand how their actions land. I've been laughed at before. Life gives you plenty of those moments, but never by family, never by someone I loved like a son. That stung. It wasn't about pride or ego. It was about the bond one thought we shared. I finally stood, wringing out my shirt. My knees ached from the sudden plunge, but I ignored it. The screen door creaked as I stepped inside, water dripping on the wood floor. The air smelled of toasted bread and lake mud. Claire met my eyes and offered a small smile, as if trying to smooth things over. "He didn't mean it, Dad," she said softly, almost apologetically. "I know," I replied, though I wasn't sure I believed it. Josh was at the table, head bent over his phone, thumbs moving fast. A cousin leaned over his shoulder, laughing at something on the screen. Maybe a game, maybe that clip of me going head first into the lake. "Josh," I said, my voice steady. He glanced up, grinning. "Hey, Grandpa, nice dive." The table chuckled, light but uneasy. I forced a smile, kept my tone calm. "You caught me off guard out there." "Come on, it was just for fun." "You look like a pro," he said, not a hint of remorse. I could have scolded him right then, but something told me it wouldn't matter. Instead, I nodded, turned away, and went upstairs to change. Sometimes silence says more than words. The afternoon passed slowly. The younger kids went out on the paddle boats. My wife read a book on the porch, and I found myself pacing the upstairs hallway, listening to bursts of laughter drift up from below. That same laughter. At one point, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. Hair damp, shirt replaced, but something harder in my expression. Not anger exactly. More like disappointment woven tight into my chest. I needed air. I headed outside, walking the trail that curved behind the cabin. The pines rose tall and close, their needles soft underfoot. I let my thoughts unravel as I walked, each step taking me further from the noise of the house. When I finally returned, the sun was dipping low, turning the lake gold. Claire was setting the grill, Josh by her side, joking again. They waved me over, and I joined them, determined to keep the peace. But the peace didn't last. During dinner, someone, probably without thinking, brought up the lake incident. "I swear, Dad, you should have seen your face." Claire laughed, trying to lighten the mood. Josh jumped in, animated, reenacting the push with his hands. Grandpa went flying. And the splash, man, you'd think he was 20 again. The table roared. Even my wife smiled, though I could tell she was watching me closely. I chuckled, because that's what you do to keep family meals easy. But inside, I felt that laugh again, sharp and cold. It wasn't just a moment anymore. It was becoming a story, a joke to be told and retold, like my pride was a punchline. All right, I said finally, raising my hands. "I think I've been the entertainment enough for one day." The mood shifted slightly. The laughter quieted. Josh grinned but seemed to sense something beneath my words. Later that night, after the dishes were cleared and the younger kids had gone to bed, I found Josh on the back deck. He was alone, scrolling on his phone, earbuds in. "Josh," I said, stepping out into the cool night air. He looked up, surprised. "Hey, Grandpa. Can't sleep." "Not yet," I said. "Mind if I sit?" Sure. I took the chair beside him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The lake was calm again, moonlight catching on its surface. You know, I began. When I was your age, my grandfather was the toughest man I knew. He taught me respect without ever raising his voice. I'd have never dreamed of shoving him in a lake. Josh blinked, then smiled awkwardly. It was just a joke. I didn't think. That's the thing, I said gently. You didn't think. And maybe that's my fault. Maybe I never showed you how much weight certain things carry. He shifted, uncomfortable. I'm sorry if I embarrassed you. It's not about embarrassment. It's about understanding that moments like that stick. They matter. Not because I got wet, but because of how it felt, how you laughed. That's what stays. Josh's smile faded. He looked down at his hands. I didn't mean to hurt you, Grandpa. Really. I believe you, I said. But words and laughs, they cut deeper than you think. Especially when they come from someone you love. We sat in silence after that. The night hummed with crickets, the soft slap of water against the dock. I could see he was thinking, and maybe that was enough. As we stood to go inside, he hesitated. I'll make it right, he said quietly. I nodded. That's all I ask. Inside, the house was quiet, but something felt lighter. Maybe it was the apology, or maybe just the fact that we'd talked. Still, that laugh lingered in the back of my mind. Not as sharp now, but not forgotten. Because some things don't fade easily, especially when they come wrapped in family and trust. The night after that quiet talk with Josh stayed with me longer than I expected. I went to bed with a little relief, thinking maybe we'd close the chapter. But by morning, something felt unsettled. It wasn't just about the laugh anymore. It was about what it revealed. An edge in him I hadn't seen before. A crack in the easy closeness I'd always trusted. I woke early, long before anyone else. The cabin was still. The kind of stillness you only get by a lake, where even the wind seems to hold its breath. I made coffee, the familiar sound of the percolator bubbling soft against the silence, and stood by the window watching the first light break over the water. It was calm outside, but inside me, something was shifting. By the time the rest of the family trickled down, slippers shuffling, sleepy hellos, the quiet I had woken to was gone. Kids ran through the kitchen. Someone burned toast. The old radio hummed low on the counter. It was the same cabin chaos I loved. But that morning, I noticed every tone more sharply. Josh was last to come down, hair sticking up, hoodie half-zipped, phone in hand. He mumbled a greeting, barely glancing my way. It wasn't rude, exactly, but there was something cooler in his voice, a distance I couldn't shake. Breakfast passed without incident, though I caught moments, little ones, that hinted at something brewing. Josh laughed more with his cousins than with us. He stayed glued to his phone, even while we cleared dishes. Once, when I asked him to give a hand with the chairs on the deck, he nodded, but didn't move until Claire repeated it. These were small things, I told myself. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But the thought followed me as I went about the morning chores. Later, when the family decided to head into town for supplies, I stayed behind. I told them I wanted to fix the old screen door. It had been sticking all week. Truth was, I needed time to think. I stood on the porch with a screwdriver, the lake shimmering in the late morning sun, and let my mind wander. That talk with Josh, his apology, his promise, had felt real. But something about the way he'd been this morning made me wonder if the laugh hadn't just been a moment, but a symptom of something bigger. The screen door groaned as I worked on it, and I found myself tightening screws that didn't need tightening. It wasn't about the door. It was about the feeling that things were shifting under my feet. By the time the family returned, arms full of groceries and laughter spilling into the yard, I had convinced myself to let it go. But life has a way of testing decisions faster than you expect. That afternoon, everyone settled into their own rhythms. The kids played a loud board game in the living room. My wife, Claire, was on the porch with her book. And Josh, he was on the dock, headphones in, face lit by his phone. I watched from the porch for a while, telling myself to leave him be. But when I saw him burst into sudden laughter, head thrown back, it hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Was he laughing at me? At the video? I pushed the thought aside, but the seed was planted. A few minutes later, Claire called me over. "He's been different lately, hasn't he?" she said quietly, closing her book. I hesitated. A little. Maybe it's just the age. She gave me a look that told me she wasn't entirely convinced. "Just keep talking to him. Don't let small things turn big." I promised I would. That evening, as the sun set in pink streaks over the lake, we gathered for another dinner. Conversation buzzed, but underneath it, I could feel something tighter in the air. Maybe it was just me. Maybe it was Josh, quieter than usual, quick with answers, but not with smiles. Halfway through the meal, his phone lit up again. This time, I noticed the cousins leaning in, muffling laughter. "What's so funny?" someone asked. Josh shook his head, smirking. "Nothing, just something online." But I caught the way one cousin tried to hide his grin. And I caught the word "doc" flash across the screen before Josh locked it. The meal went on, but my mind didn't. Something was happening here, and I didn't like where it was going. When dinner ended, I found myself restless. I walked down to the dock, the boards cool under my feet, and stood there listening to the water. I thought about family, about trust, about how quickly things can shift when pride gets bruised. Josh eventually came down, phone in pocket now. He hesitated when he saw me. "Grandpa," he said, "you okay?" "I'm fine," I replied, though my voice carried a weight. He stepped closer, hands in his pockets. "You sure? You've been different." I almost laughed at that. Have I? Maybe I've been watching too closely. Maybe I saw something today I didn't like. He looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" "Josh," I said gently, "sometimes a laugh is just a laugh. But sometimes it's something else. I'm just asking you to think about which one yours is." There was a pause, a flicker in his expression. "I told you, I didn't mean anything." "Good," I said. "Because this family, we hold each other up. We don't turn each other into stories for a screen." His face softened, and for a moment, the distance seemed to shrink. We stood there a while, saying nothing. The lake was quiet, but inside me, I knew this wasn't over. Something was shifting, slow, silent, like a storm far off that you can't see yet, but can feel in your bones. The night air was still thick with unspoken words when Josh and I walked back from the dock. The boards creaked behind us, each step echoing louder than it should have. We didn't speak. He stayed half a pace behind me, and I could feel his uncertainty, his hesitation, like a faint vibration in the silence. Inside, the house was quiet. Dinner plates had been cleared, the cousins had retreated to their rooms, and Claire was reading by the dim glow of the kitchen light. She glanced up when we came in, eyes flicking between us, but she said nothing. Maybe she sensed the invisible thread stretched tight between grandfather and grandson. I told Josh to get some rest. He nodded, eyes lowered, and slipped upstairs without another word. I stayed behind, leaning on the counter, staring at nothing in particular. The conversation on the dock kept replaying, his defensive tone, my quiet warnings. Something in me shifted then. I realized I couldn't confront this head-on, not with anger. If I did, it would only push him further away. But I also knew I couldn't let it slide. Revenge isn't always loud, and it isn't always cruel. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is a quiet one, patient, deliberate, and precise. The next morning, I woke earlier than anyone else. I moved through the cabin quietly, as if the floorboards themselves were keeping secrets from me. While the coffee brewed, I opened my laptop at the corner table and searched through old family photos. Years of memories appeared, birthday cakes, camping trips, graduations. I downloaded a handful, the ones that told a story of closeness, laughter, and trust. Then I opened another folder, the one with the footage from last night. Josh had left his camera bag by the porch, the lens cap still off, and curiosity had gotten the better of me. I wasn't snooping, I told myself that. I was just looking for context. But as I scanned through the files, I found it. A clip of me, standing on the dock, squinting against the sun, completely unaware. It wasn't cruel, not really, but the caption he typed. "Old man's wisdom hour." Stung. The laughter that followed wasn't from love. It was sharper, edged with something that cut a little too deep. I didn't feel angry. I felt disappointed. That's when the plan began to form. By the time everyone woke, I had a plan in motion. Breakfast was cheerful, light, the cousins laughing about some inside joke, Claire humming as she flipped pancakes. Josh joined last again, still half distracted by his phone. But I didn't look at him. Not directly. Instead, I started talking. I told a story about the first time I took Josh fishing, how he'd nearly tipped the canoe and screamed so loud he scared the fish away. I exaggerated just enough to make it funny. The table roared with laughter. Even Claire chuckled. Josh gave a tight smile, clearly uncomfortable. It was small, harmless, but deliberate. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't loud. But I made him feel what I'd felt, seen when he wasn't ready, exposed in a way he didn't control. Over the next few hours, the pattern continued. I'd mention a funny story here, an old photo there. I made sure the cousins saw the family album I'd left open on the coffee table. Pictures of Josh as a toddler in oversized boots, Josh covered in spaghetti sauce, Josh asleep on the porch with a comic book over his face. Every time he walked by, I caught the flicker in his expression. Embarrassment, annoyance. It wasn't cruel humiliation. It was gentle, almost playful. But it made a point. The lens can turn both ways. By mid-afternoon, Josh couldn't take it anymore. He followed me to the shed, where I was fixing a loose hinge on the lawn chair. "Grandpa," he said, trying to keep his voice low. "Can you stop?" I turned slowly, screwdriver in hand. "Stop what?" "You know what. The stories, the pictures. You're making me look stupid." I studied him calm. "I'm sharing memories, Josh. The same way you shared a laugh at mine." He blinked. The flush on his face deepened. "That was different." "Was it?" I asked. "You didn't think anyone would see that clip. I didn't think anyone would mind a few old photos. Funny how that works." He didn't answer at first. He just stood there, jaw tight. Finally, he said, "I didn't mean to make you feel bad." "I know," I said softly. "But you did. And maybe now you know how it feels." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The shed smelled of cedar and oil. And outside, a bird called across the water. Then he sighed, shoulders lowering. "I get it," he said finally. "I'll delete the video." "That's your choice," I replied, turning back to the hinge. "But understand this, Josh, family isn't content. We laugh with each other, not each other. Remember that." He nodded, quiet now. Something in his expression softened, the wall between us lowering just enough. He turned to leave, but before he stepped out, he said, "You're right. I'm sorry." When he was gone, I leaned back on the stool and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It wasn't satisfaction, not really. It was something gentler. Relief, maybe. Understanding. Revenge doesn't always mean destruction. Sometimes it's just a mirror, held steady until the other person sees what you see. That day, without yelling, without anger, I found a way to make my point. And maybe, just maybe, we both learned something. As the sun began to sink over the lake, I closed the shed and headed toward the house. Josh was on the porch, phone down, watching the water. When he saw me, he lifted his hand in a quiet wave. I waved back. The storm between us wasn't gone. Not yet, but it was quiet now. Quiet enough for the evening breeze to carry it away. Josh was still sitting on the porch when I walked up, the lake behind him rippling under the last streaks of sunlight. He didn't look at his phone this time. His hands rested on his knees, and his shoulders were relaxed, as if a weight had finally eased. When he saw me, he stood, awkward at first, then steadier. "I meant what I said," he told me quietly. "I'm sorry." Something in his voice was different, less defensive, more open. I nodded and gestured for him to sit again. We settled side by side, the old wooden bench creaking beneath us. For a long time, we said nothing. The lake did the talking, its gentle lap against the shore filling the silence like a soft reminder that some things don't need words. But apologies are only the start of learning. A lesson sticks only when it's lived, not just spoken. "You know," I began, "when I was your age, I thought I knew everything. Thought the world was something to conquer, not something to listen to." Josh gave me a sideways glance. "What changed?" I smiled. "Life. It has a way of showing you that it's bigger than your lens. no matter how wide it is. He chuckled faintly at the mention of the lens, then leaned back. I didn't think a video could hurt. It was just a joke. Jokes are fine, I said, but the best ones don't leave scars. That's the difference between laughing with someone and laughing at them. I could see the words sinking in, his gaze on the water, his thoughts somewhere deeper. So I decided to give him something to hold on to. Something not from a lecture, but a story. When I was your age, I had a friend named Ben. We were as close as brothers. One summer, I made a joke about him in front of a group. Thought it was harmless. He laughed along, but I saw it hit him. We never spoke about it, but things were never quite the same after that. When he moved away, I didn't get to fix it, and I've carried that with me ever since. Josh turned to me fully now. You still think about it? Every time I open my mouth to tease someone, I said, because words can build or break, and once they leave you, you can't call them back. For a moment, he didn't respond. His jaw tightened, then eased. I think I get it. Good, I said softly. But there's something else you should understand. Making mistakes doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you human. What matters is what you do after. The conversation drifted then, easy and unforced. We talked about things that didn't sting. His college plans, the music he liked, the trips he wanted to take. I listened more than I spoke, letting him lead. Every so often, his face lit up when he shared something he loved, and I realized how little I'd asked before. Later, when the stars began to prick through the sky, Claire joined us with mugs of cocoa. She sat on the porch railing, legs swinging like she used to as a girl. What are you two plotting out here? She teased. World domination, Josh said with a grin. Good, she replied. Just remember to be kind rulers. It broke the tension completely, and for the first time in days, the three of us laughed together without sharp edges. The next morning, the lesson deepened without me saying a word. Josh came down early, hair still messy, camera in hand. Instead of pointing it at us, he turned it toward the lake. He crouched low, framed the ripples, the morning mist, the old dock. When I poured coffee, he looked up. Can I show you something? I nodded, and he flipped the screen around. Instead of quick, flashy cuts, it was slow and thoughtful. The way the light hit the water, the quiet of the woods, even the way the wind moved the grass. It all felt intentional, gentle. I wanted to try something different, he said. Not everything needs to be a joke. There was pride in his voice, but also humility. He wasn't seeking praise. He was sharing a piece of himself. It's beautiful, I said honestly. You've got a good eye. That small acknowledgement seemed to mean more than any lecture could. He smiled, a real smile this time, and tucked the camera away. As the day went on, he surprised me again. When the cousins gathered for a hike, he left his phone behind and walked beside me. He asked questions, not shallow ones, but thoughtful ones. About my first job, my regrets, the best and worst choices I'd made. And I answered, not as a teacher, but as someone letting him peek into a life already lived. At the summit, overlooking the lake below, he turned to me. Thanks, he said. For what? For not yelling. For letting me figure it out. I placed a hand on his shoulder. You'll make your own mistakes, Josh. But if you listen, really listen, you'll make fewer of the same ones twice. That's the best any of us can do. When we returned, the house was alive with the easy noise of family. But something had shifted between us, subtle but real. The tension was gone, replaced by something quieter. Respect, maybe even trust. That night, as we packed to leave, he handed me a small envelope. Open it later, he said. When I did, hours after the drive home, I found a single photo inside. It was of me, sitting on the dock, the lake behind me, the sun catching my face, just right. No caption, no joke. Just a quiet moment captured with care. On the back, he'd written 6 words. Not everything needs to be loud. I sat there a long time, holding that picture. In it, I saw the lesson not just taught, but learned. And I knew then that some lessons don't fade. They settle in, quiet but unshakable. They become part of the way you see the world. And if you're lucky, they're passed on. The lake was calm that evening, but inside me, something moved. A kind of peace I hadn't expected. It was a reminder that sometimes the hardest storms leave behind the clearest skies. And those are the lessons that last forever.